Hey everybody, welcome back to the shop. So I've got some rowdy grandchildren coming for a visit. Now I gotta figure out how I'm gonna keep these kids under control before I lose the rest of my hair. How am I gonna do it? Well, that ought to do it. A cage. That'll keep those unruly grandchildren in. Don't you think? It's not really for the grandchildren. My son's coming down with his dog, and that dog happens to be the same size as Mr. Atlas. And he tells me, "Hi Atlas." He tells me that that dog is a Houdini, and I said to my son Eric, Eric, I will build you a cage that dog won't come out of. Now this cage has a guillotine gate, as you see here as I lifted it. It has a steel liner on the inside so that he can't chew out. It's got the gate again. Spinning bars so he can't pull in on it and pull it in. I made a gate he won't get out of. And if you want to see how I did it, watch the rest of the video and let's get started. I made the other three panels off camera. This is the door panel, and all of the panels utilize lap joints. And what we're going to need to do here is remove these pieces out of the center of the top and bottom so that the boards will remain at the same height across the face of the panel. And here we're cutting those notches out. I could have used a saw to clean them completely, but what fun is that? And you wouldn't get all these extra pieces of wood, these little wood chips, that I can take over and put in my rocket stove and heat this shop. Like so. I'm going to use the router with the wide base to clean these up. Make sure they're flush, even, true, parallel, plumb, and square. Ain't they pretty? And by clamping the two pieces together, we know that they are exactly the same. They are definitely identical, and alignment will be correct. As you can see here. Perfect fit. Now I made this little block because we're going to put some of this stuff together with dowel joinery. And this high grain or heavy grained 2x4s was not cooperating. The drill was dancing all over. By making this guide the same width of the 2x4 as I'm showing you there, I don't have to worry about centering. The drill is forced straight and alignment is perfect. Because now each hole is exactly the same. Each group of 3 holes. And the drill dancing was even worse on the end grain like this. But as you can see, again, the block is the same thickness as the 2x4. It is the same width as the 2x4. If you take 5 minutes and make yourself a little jig like this, it will save you all kinds of time in the long run. And the finished product will be much better as well. Bingo, bango, bongo. 3 pins fit. And these 2 pieces are going to go right here. Now what I'm going to do is dry fit this whole thing to make sure that it all fits together before I put the yellow goop on it. It's pretty much standard practice when you're doing joinery. Dry fit everything to make sure everything fits, and you're good to go. And we'll start applying the yellow goop. And I made a mistake here. If you're paying close attention, you'll see that I've got the yellow goop all over the dowel joinery piece, but I don't have any glue on the lap joint, which limits the ability to take this thing back apart to put glue on those lap joints. I had to use some fancy prying and pushing around to get them open enough to put the glue on them. And there's the finished panel. And we're going to assemble this with clamps now to give you a little bit of an idea of what it looks like. This cage is enormous. 54 inches long, 47 inches wide, 45 inches tall. Use the clamp there as a hook to grab the other panel. Again, we want this to be able to be disassembled, so we're assembling it with pass-through bolts. That way each of these panels will be able to be removed and stacked in a pickup truck or a trailer and taken wherever he decides to take them. I'm using this block again just as a spacer. The knob on that Joint Pro or Joint Mate is landing on the block, and that's how I'm dividing the space between the middle where I'm going to put the through bolts. Just adds a little uniformity to this thing. Started the hole, I was about 1/4 of an inch short. Finished the hole, and we have something short here, the wrong length bolt. Now I can't do a project without using my router, or my CNC I should say. And this is going to be a simple number template that I can use a guide bearing on my handheld router to number the pieces so that reassembly, disassembly and reassembly is simple. We'll line up the numbers, put the panels back together, and everything should fit. Easy peasy. And there's the guide bearing right there, and it'll ride on the inside of that template, milling away the material on the cage panels. Good to go. As easy as 1, 2, 3. Change the plate, put in the guide bearing, and rock and roll. And when you finish milling them out, this is what it looks like. We had one little glitch with this. The stem on the guide bearing was just a little bit too long for the templates, so I took it over to the disc sander and shortened the post. That way it slid much better inside the template. It was basically touching the stock material, and we didn't want that. Took off 1/16 of an inch, I think. And it looks like a 3 to me. Now half of the number is on one half of a panel and the other half is on the other half of the panel, or the other panel. That way when you assemble it, you make your numbers line up and it works. And here I couldn't help myself but do one of these free-handed in the back where it wasn't quite as visible. And the number 4 has the straightest line, so we'll do it on that one. My old eyes weren't cooperating, so we added some light from below so that I could see better. And we didn't do too bad free-handed, but it was still much easier with those templates. Rounding the corners. This will be on the outside corner of the panel. Putting on some color here. The color will be on the outside, the wood will be on the inside, and the wood will be covered with a metal panel, so there'll be no wood exposed for the doggy to get a hold of. Alright, I'm going to do my best to explain how I made this stopped dovetail here. This is the top rail of this cage. It's in the center. It'll be a crossbar to support the roof. Here's a little practice piece. As you can see, it fits quite well. I measured half the distance across the top of the roof. That's this line. Then I measured down 1/2 of an inch with my 1/2 inch spacer, because I know that the cutter on my router has a 1/2 an inch worth of cut. I did a practice piece here, measured off of the deepest point. From there, without moving my router, I put the router in place, created a fence with this without moving the router. I drew a line on the practice piece, ran the router through, then measured the distance from that point to there, and I know that it's 3 11/16 of an inch from there to there. So that tells me at the deepest point of the cut, I need to put my fence at 3 11/16 if I want this point to be center of my line. I hope I'm explaining that well enough. Then, to create an 1.5 inch gap, I figured it out that I needed to come off of the original fence 1 inch. So I put my spacer in there, put my router back in, pushed another fence up against this side of the router, drew a line, locked it down. Now I know, take this out, now I know as I go like this, in and out, I've got the exact measurement that I'm looking for. Another thing I did was, I used a bevel gauge to determine the angle of these. Once I had that angle, I took my digital angle finder, this guy, over to my table saw, because I know that's flat. Set this on the table saw, zeroed it out, and then put it on the side of the T-bevel to tell me what the exact angle was. I then adjusted the table saw to that angle and adjusted the depth of cut so it was just taking off the corner, and bing bang boom, you have a beautiful dovetail joint that we can slide in and out to disassemble and reassemble this cage. So here's a panel, and we'll go through the process. Finding center, marking center, marking the edge, 1/2 inch deep, putting on a guide, adding 1 inch, moving to the left, the second guide. One thing I didn't mention was the stop plate in the back, so that I didn't go too deep. That's that piece of cedar that you see back there. Made a mark, checked myself, found out that I had the guides in the wrong position. Luckily it did not mess up the joints. Made some adjustments, some more lines, and then we finish the dovetail. Always pays to stop in the middle and double check your measurements before you go hogging away all the material and realize you just ruined the panel. Here we're adjusting the height of the blade, 1/2 an inch high. Here we're using my mortise and tenon jig. I'm adjusting right to the corner of the 2x4. All I want is just enough to make the angle for the dovetail, for the male portion of the dovetail. Flipping it around and run it through, flip it over and run it through 2 more times. Easy peasy. Let's see if it fits. Like a glove. Closer look. Now the 2x4 was bowed, but that didn't mean the thing wasn't going to fit in there. Looks pretty tight to me for structural lumber. Let's see if it's got enough strength to hold, well, me. That ought to be strong enough. Here we're assembling the door. Again, we're going to use lap joints. And as you saw in the beginning, this door has some fancy things about it. So we need to make sure everything lines up correctly. And then we start measuring for spacing. I felt if the first pipe was an inch off of the wood, it would be very difficult for the dog to chew on the door without hitting the pipe, which should protect the door, at least that's my theory. Here we're laying out for the center pipes, using a Japanese around the corner square, marking gauge for the center. Little pencil to help the old eyes see again. Using an awl to start the holes, so my drill bit goes where I ask it to. And we hog away some holes with some Forstner bits. I believe that threaded rod was 7/16 threaded rod. We made the holes just a little bigger, and they do not go all the way through. Another angle of the same thing. I'm going to take the laser with a hacksaw blade in it and cut these off to the proper length. By laser, I mean the portable bandsaw. I should have yelled timber there, or something like that. Half-inch PVC fits over those threaded rods almost perfectly to create the rollers. And again, the bladed laser goes through that like butter. The only unfortunate thing is I can't cut a straight line to save my life with that bandsaw laser. So once we're finished here, we'll take them over to the disc sander and square up the ends. Just like this. It only takes a second or two, and it cleans them right up. And as you can see, they are almost a perfect fit for that threaded rod. Dare I say they are a perfect fit. Each pipe, each assembly goes in one of the holes. We put the puzzle together and it begins to look like a gate. Probably should have clamped it together before I tried to lift it and show you this. Yep, should have clamped it. Use a little Tight Bond 3 here to give me some extra time to play around putting this together, making sure that it's square and that everything is correct. So I guess we'll have to call this the white goop instead of the yellow goop. It's a pretty good shot of the threaded rod and the pipes. You can see how nicely they fit together. I did take some bar clamps and clamp in the other direction on these after I confirmed square. I did that off camera. That's better. Now I can lift it up without it falling apart. Here I thought we'd add a little bit of fanciness to these. Maybe making them look like a candy cane. And my wife commented, you know, they're not the same. I said, you never find a candy cane that's exactly the same. That was a good excuse for not getting them the same. Little red paint, because every apartment needs a door that stands out, or every house, I should say. My helper just walked through in the background there. She always tries to sneak through when the camera's running and I catch her. Going to use the bandsaw laser one more time. These will be the slides for the guillotine gate. Take two of them, bolt or weld them together in opposite directions, and it creates a slide. We'll give this one a little high-powered karate chop and break it apart. I was too strong for the vise. Bring over the portable drill press. And as I said, one piece of angle iron one way, one the other, and it creates a slide. As you can see here. And we'll proceed to poke 1,000 holes in this thing. Not really 1,000. We put 3 or 4 bolts through each piece. Countersunk the holes. Use stove bolts so they don't rub on the door as the door slides up and down. We'll snug these together and they'll be good to go. Now the gentleman that's getting this has a pretty highfalutin welding certification. I'm wondering if maybe when he gets this home, if he won't throw a couple welds on there. Let's see what it looks like. Not too shabby. Here we're going to trim these off for length with a human track saw. There was a time in construction where people cut panels without a track saw and they did it very straight. Just takes a little bit of practice. Here we're doing the metal liner, obviously. Going to do a little bit of acrobatics to get up there and cut it off. Now the footage I had where I nailed this to the panel, I lost it. The battery failed on the camera and the camera shut off. But one thing I wanted to point out, whenever you do nail down tin, in order to avoid any ripples or kinks in your panels, start in the center and nail from the center outward in every direction, and that'll prevent the ripples that you'll find sometimes when you nail that stuff together. And it kills me to throw away these pigtails because I'm sure there's some kind of arts and crafts that I could do with these, but at this point we're just trying to get this project finished. Be very careful with these tools. I had one of those pigtails hit me in the face one time. It was rather unpleasant. Half the line here. Huh. I cut the other half off right here. I don't know if you can see that, but the other half is right there. That's 30 years of tin knocking experience. Woohoo! The only HVAC stuff I'm going to show you on this channel. And just like every good tin knocker, I can't find my good tin snips, so we'll use these old boogers. See if I can cut a straight line with these. Look, Ma, no fish hooks. Just like that. Now, if you're wondering why this is all bigger, because I don't want any interference when it comes time to putting that crossbar in. If the guy that's getting this cage decides to take this apart and put it back together, I don't want to have him have a fight here. So we're going to give him a little slack. Here we're creating the stop for the bottom of the guillotine gate, using our fancy spreader to get the screws in the exact same spot or the exact same spacing. This will go on the bottom of the guillotine gate to stop it from sliding through to the floor, like so. We'll clamp him in place, run the screws in, and then remove it and take it outside and paint it blue so that it matches the slides. And the heads of the screws, because that's just what you do when you're being fancy. You paint the heads of the screws. Lining up my slides so that I can put those in. We're going to use 1-inch pan head screws to attach these to the gate itself, or to the front panel itself. So I think you get the idea of what we're doing here now. In goes doggy. Doggy no come out. That was done, not the paint, but the sleeves. So if he bites the threaded rod, he doesn't get hurt. If he reaches in like this and tries to pull on it, his paw will roll off. He's not getting out of here. This piece is the header for the door, so the top of the door is closed. We didn't want a gap there where my hands are above the drill, so the dog would stick his nose through there and get stuck. Using pocket screws again. Would have liked to have done that with dowel joinery, but unfortunately I didn't know where the top of that door needed to be, or the top of that bar needed to be. Putting in the top header. Here we're going to put the bottom tin, the interior tin, on the door panel. We're going to cheat a little bit here. We're going to put the panel on top of the tin and trace it out with a Sharpie so that I don't have to use a tape measure and get it wrong. I like to work as simply as possible when we're doing things like this, especially since that metal is extremely expensive. It looks silver, but I'm pretty sure it's made of gold. So just like that, we do an outline of everything that we need to cut off. Nothing to it. Fancy. Back to the pigtail tool. Now you drill a big hole. If you're going to make a center hole in a piece of tin or anything else, you drill a big hole, take some tin snips and widen the hole, and then you can get a nibbler in there. That tool is called a nibbler. And it will cut around the corners, whereas the pigtail tool won't. You use it a lot like you would use a jigsaw. That tool is extremely old. I've had that tool for probably 15 years and it's still working. We're doing this to round over the inside so that nobody gets hurt. No dogs get cut or anybody else when they're dealing with this cage. Don't go doing this unless you round the corners off. Oops, forgot one. As I said, start in the center and work your way out. I put the 2 nails on the bottom, if anybody says, hey, you didn't start in the center, just to hold it in place, and then I worked from the middle outward. Here we're putting the handle on, and we keep accentuating with the blue color here. As I said, when you're fancy, you paint the head of your screws blue, and you gotta believe I'm not putting those in with a screwdriver. And there it is. As always, I hope you got something out of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it was a little long, but it was a lot of fun making this cage, jail cell, whatever you want to say this thing is. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you got something out of it. Maybe learned a few things here or there. Maybe laughed a little bit. Give us a like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And as always, I'll catch you on the next one. Might not have been a good idea getting in this thing.